Welcome everybody. So second edition of Shiji our APAC edition. Hope you're all safe and well. Greetings from the Sydney office of Shiji Australia. My name is Matthew Clark, sales manager for our region. I'll be your host today. Let's go around the room for some introductions. We might head north, far north. Nicholas, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Great to be part of the panel and joined by the lovely Gavin, Patricia, and Duncan. And looking forward to kind of, as you mentioned, getting into the thick of the current changes in the environment we're in.
Thank you. Welcome very much. Gavin, welcome as well. Colleague, team member, friend within Shangri-La, I'm sure.
I'm normally ally, but that's okay. Name's Gavin Maloney. So yes, I'm based in Sydney, but I have a bit of a hybrid role for the last year. So currently looking after distribution and Fiji, as well as Cairns.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Some challenging times amongst that region and those locations in particular, right? Those destinations. So I'm sure there's plenty we can touch on there. Duncan, a partner of the Shiji distribution team, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, thanks for having us on. So I'm Duncan Waterman. I'm the country manager for D-Edge Hospitality Solutions. We're a CRS, CRM, and digital marketing platform for hotels.
So welcome again. And Tricia, one of the newest members of our Shiji team globally. So welcome and welcome to the webinar.
Thanks, Matt. Yes, I joined Shiji Global Distribution Team about 6 months ago. Been really enjoying it so far, learning heaps and heaps, as you can imagine. It's such an interesting subject and dark art. Prior to that, I was the General Manager for IT for event hospitality for the hotel sector, being Ridges, QT and Atura hotels in Australia and New Zealand for quite some time. So in that role, I obviously was also involved in distribution, and I guess that's where I got my love of it from. Yeah, great to be here.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm sure there's some insight you can share from both hats. So appreciate that, Tricia. Let's jump in. Duncan, the last 12 months, 18 months, right? We're still in the thick of it. I think you could well and truly describe. What is accommodation, the research that the consumer is doing, the booking demand, what does that sort of look like over the last 12, 18 months if we just sort of reflect for a few moments?
Yeah, thanks. Obviously, it's hard to comment generally across APAC, but what I thought I'd pull out was some good news to start off with, because it's particularly tough in Greater Sydney where I am, and I'm sure it's the same for many areas. But the good news for APAC overall, that the Web Direct statistic is 41% compared to 27% in 2019. So D-Edge has a hospitality recovery barometer, and we collect a lot of stats on this sort of thing. And really I guess the main drivers of that is the booking share of direct revenue from digital media. Now it's dropped recently, but there's an opportunity there for hotels. But the fact that it's dropped recently means that the OTAs have also dropped their advertising. So there's less pressure on advertising around brand name search, meta search, display ads. And the drop really is from 34% to 21% in the latest stats that we've put out. So that's digital media as a contributor to direct bookings. So hotels are saving money. There's less pressure on ad costs, and the OTAs are really, I guess, on the defensive. So there is an opportunity for hotels to capitalize on that. And so that's the key, I guess, the key good news that we have. And then the other statistics that we see, they're all positive for hotels. There's this more trust in booking direct. So the average booking value we see is in euros, this all is $208 versus an average booking value of €114 with Expedia and 93 with booking.com. Length of stay booking direct is 1.89 nights. With Expedia, it's 1.53 nights, and booking is 1.47. And lead time through the direct channel is 27 days versus Expedia 17 and Booking 12. And so all those numbers are positively skewed to hotels booking direct, really because I guess the consumers just got more confidence in dealing with the hotel at this time. So there's some bad news, but there's some glimmers of hope for hotels to capitalize on.
Awesome, I appreciate that, and I suppose for our attendees who are watching today, you'll certainly get a recording of this session so you can sort of digest some of that content, and I'm sure there'll be more of it over the next hour as well. We purposely sort of didn't want to get stuck into presenting slides and what have you around the data. So Duncan, I appreciate you just sort of pulling out some of those key elements and like you say, positively trying to focus on where the good news story is, or what some of the advantages are that can be that can be taken and run with at this stage. And I think around some of that, I suppose, booking performance and behavior, and maybe Nicholas, for yourself, what are you seeing as in the key sort of what consumers are looking for, or how they're looking across the region at this stage?
So I think it's very interesting, and for me in the research that we kind of look into, and the number of studies we've gone into, this really is the what and the how. And what's fascinating, and I probably should have started with this in the beginning, is I've subsequently made the move from our UK offices to our HQ in Hong Kong. So after going through numerous lockdowns in the UK and watching Europe open, you kind of get a sense of how we all seem to be doing the same repetitive human behavior. And you see that in searches, depending on what stage of really when you can travel. So when you look at what people are searching, they're searching for things like low infection rates, vaccination rates, and one which was really interesting, which was more skewed towards the corporate, is the reopening of client offices. And I think that's a really important one to mention, because people are gearing up. You know, I think we're far enough down this road in the pandemic that business is still taking place and people are really gearing up. But that said, it's very twofold, right? So if you have domestic drivers, it's going to be staycation searches. That's natural. International drivers would be, can I travel there? You know, what are the quarantine restrictions? If you look at the UK, they have their traffic light system, you know, so that's constantly evolving, and you need to make sure that although the demand might be there, can I actually travel there? To touch on Duncan's sentiment around the strength of direct channels, it's something that we're very much enjoying. And I think that comes from the amount of information that consumers, you know, really want to get access to around health and safety, and where they can access that information accurately. But what has been fascinating to watch, I think, more in the APAC region, is the strength of mobile and direct. You know, mobile as well as app-driven solutions. And, you know, Booking.com previously published that I think it was 2 and 3 of their bookings are coming on mobile rates now. So it's something to really keep an eye on in terms of where and how people are searching.
Yeah, right. I appreciate that, and yes, thanks for calling out sort of the visibility that you've seen, if you like, and the experiences that you've seen firsthand from UK now through to Southeast Asia. And maybe, Gavin, if we drill down further into our region, and we've been sharing this series of webinars purely across APAC, obviously, and then the properties and the regions that you're looking around, Sydney, Fiji, and Cairns. What's the localized performance and feeling out there that has been sort of driving and influencing this type of behavior over the past 12 months or so?
Yeah, I guess that with the opening and closing of borders and those restrictions, and, you know, it's a general sentiment that interstate has been very strong, and especially in Queensland. And it is very relevant even in New South Wales with Sydney. But the resilience within the market, and I think that with all the disruption at the moment in relation to, you know, that of borders being closed, people are still looking for those getaways and opportunities to escape. And, you know, Cairns, as for an example, is a destination that is away from it all. It's 1,500 kilometres from any other major city, and it's very attractive, and it's really going through a different resurgence. You know, it does take time, we're seeing that it probably will take between 2 to 3 months to get back to some sort of normality. But there is definitely, the Australians love to travel, and I think that's really, it just shows that they are invested in being able to have those experiences, and it's part of, I guess, the DNA of what people like to do, is to try and explore and be able to get out and about. And I think that that's why regional areas have been so strong. Other examples is that there's definitely, even the baby boomers and so forth, they're still traveling, special interest groups and so forth that are still planning their holidays within the next 3, 6, and 12 months. And I think that type of encouragement is really favourable to show that this will come back. And how you're in front of those customers and be able to have everything in place to be able to ramp up and ramp down. This is one of the, I guess, the new opportunities that hotels are seeing.
I appreciate that, and I think we're certainly going to hopefully touch on in a little bit of detail about how to re-engage that consumer, right? How to make sure you're best placed to reconnect as such, or stay connected in a relevant fashion. And thankfully, I'm going to say Aussies, but thankfully people in our region do love to travel. And Tricia, maybe because of that sort of consistent interest, demand, love of travel, are we seeing some channels or behavior or booking patterns? Are the consistent ones still the consistent performers, or are there some sort of newbies in town, newbies on the scene that are really drawing some attention and performance?
Yeah, I think as the guys mentioned before, there's obviously an increase in direct bookings, but also some of the traditional global booking channels like Expedia and Booking.com maybe have dropped a little bit, and there's more production from some of the regional channels. So in Australia and New Zealand, we're seeing a little bit more booking from Flight Centre, for instance. And in some of the Asian countries, there's more bookings coming through from, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and some of those Indonesian booking sites like Ticket.com, Peggy and Traveloka. So probably because bookings are more domestic and, or more, they're not as global as they were before, these more regional sites are the ones that are coming to the forefront. And then the other thing is, I think that there's differences in the lead times, and there's got to be that ability to cancel a booking if necessary, and people want to see that they can do that. So yeah, there has been a change in the way people are booking.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree that I'm certainly more diligent in looking at the change clauses and the booking adjustment clauses these days than maybe what I've been previously. That would be for sure. I appreciate you just calling out on some of the specific sort of channels and connections there that hoteliers can really possibly go and investigate to see whether they're suitable for their property or their group. If we look at, Nicholas, you called out staycation in particular. Gavin, you touched on sort of the intrastate travel. If we look at really just sort of the traditional leisure versus business travel, is that a thing still moving forward? Are they two core drivers that we have always traditionally looked at that will still be looked at moving forward? Or is this way that we're talking now sort of consuming a lot of that? Nicholas, Gavin, I'll throw to you first.
I think it depends how far in advance we need to look. I mean, right now, and it's everyone's in the same focus, right? Which is focus on the short term, full your hotel rooms. And the reality is, when borders are closed, you're pretty limited. And what Patricia spoke on in terms of the change and where the business is coming from is very true. Right now, we're reliant on specific source markets, which is purely domestic. I think what we see when we start looking at places like the US and China, we see a slightly different model, something that we will be going into, right? Which is a resurgence of corporate, starting with domestic, regional, followed by international. So will there be a place for corporate? Always. You know, that's a core segment. It's obviously been severely hit, but it's, you know, they talk about revenge travel and pent up demand, and the reality is that's going to come from both leisure and corporate. So we're seeing it in certain regions, and we're excited to see it come back into other parts of APAC.
Yeah. And Gavin, you touched on Cairns as an example, right? That it's as far away as you can get if you're in Australia, if you like, from a domestic point of view, and that sort of secluded location is attractive for leisure and business, right? Is that still are they still two key segments moving forward, or is this a different world now?
I think that's actually just highlighted how important the corporate government sector is to businesses because of that consistency. And I think that it probably got, you know, overshadowed due to the inbound business that was going to destinations like Cairns. And now that's really just highlighted that, you know, during all this, all the different, you know, closures and restrictions, that has been very resilient in regards to, and also the leisure business. It's continued, you know, that if we didn't have our locals business, and we didn't have that local community, and you know, our local, just for an example, like Cairns or like any destination in Australia, you know, that 2-3 hour radius has been very vital for that consistency, both in not just in accommodation, but in food and beverage, and it really is shown through during this whole pandemic, and that, you know, you can never forget that. And I think that's what everyone needs to realise, is that, you know, don't ever forget who's actually your bread and butter, because the cream is great, but it's not always going to be there through the good times and the bad.
I'm going to put my old hotelier hat on, and thank you for calling out the food and beverage aspects. We also have our episode next week is all about F&B, so I'll plug that later on. In other big picture stuff, so leisure and travel. So Trisha, China used to be. China was supporting, if not a bulk of our region, right, in bringing the travel dollar. And there was a trajectory that was sort of seeing who was coming after China. Is that still going to be the same trajectory? Are we on the same path? Or again, is everything disrupted with regards to, is China coming back, or who's the next China?
So interestingly, looking at the stats for the Shiji distribution systems booking patterns, we're seeing, and obviously we have a predominance of Chinese bookers because we're out of that area in the first instance, although we do have a lot of international. What we're seeing is that the number of bookings within China has almost doubled what was booked in 2019. Sorry. So that's obviously all now domestic. So there is a lot of pent up demand there. And I think that as soon as borders reopen, that the Chinese travel will come back. But I guess we also have to look at what other markets may come back. And I think we're going to talk about that again later too. But again, it's all about the emerging middle class, and as they have more money to spend, they're more likely to spend it on travel. Something that I think that we should mention is that with the Chinese demand, you know, a lot of the larger chains, the big global chains, are spending more and more money on investing in advertising and getting onto the booking channels that are important in China. So they're, you know, getting onto Fliggy, they're getting onto Meituan and Dita Travel. They're creating WeChat booking engines so that they can capture that Chinese market when it does come back, when the borders do open. So it's something to consider. The more exposure you have in that Chinese market, the more likely you will get that booking, because they're not necessarily going to book you if they don't know your hotel name. So yeah, I think that we're going to see Chinese market come back, but I think there'll be other markets as well that will be interesting to watch.
All right, thank you, Trisha. So just a reminder, if there's questions, feel free to drop them into the Q&A, or I think there's also an option there just to throw a question straight to the panelists if you'd like to do that. We'll certainly try and cover those towards the end. Duncan, we've covered quite a bit so far with leisure and business, rightly so, interstate travel, and sort of maybe calling out the sort of re-emergence of the China middle market, etc. Across all of your channels and the partners that you're working with, are you seeing that as a consistent message? Are there new markets or ways of engaging that are starting to step to the fore?
I wouldn't say new. I think what Patricia said, and earlier Nicholas talking about some of the emerging channels that are springing up in Indonesia, we've taken note of. For hotels to maximize the exposure through any dominant or large OTA will produce the billboard effect. And so going back to what we were talking about earlier, the consumer will definitely search and book on those big booking engines, but they'll also use them as search engines. And so what we've seen is hotels investing in digital marketing platforms, and DH has a couple of different offers around this area. And then it gives the hotel the ability to invest in the advertising space to win that booking on search, meta search, particularly. And so we would encourage hotels to really look at that if they haven't before. You know, we've got the classic CRS, channel management booking engine space, but there's also this digital marketing platform, which is agnostic across channel managers and booking engines. And so that's really where we think hotels can win very effectively, because the demand is there. People are searching across all OTAs, and particularly Google, and Google's, I guess, really the place that I guess bookings are won and lost, really. And so that's where we're seeing a lot of spend going. So that's really what hotels can maximize on right now.
Okay, I appreciate that. I like the term the billboard effect, and sort of how that relates to using those platforms as a search tool and just as a presence tool, if you like, to then convert elsewhere. I quite like that. And maybe trying to convert that search process into a spend process. And Nicholas, you've seen this filter from Europe down to now Southeast Asia, right? Is there a concept, and I know we had in our chat beforehand, this sort of concept of winning the early battle, and you sort of maybe rightly so corrected me in that, which I'm totally okay with. What is this a battle, or are we in some type of holding pattern at the moment, trying and waiting to re-emerge?
I think there's definitely a pattern, and we see it across multiple destinations. And I think the pattern is really, are you able to travel? Being the first pattern. The second is, are there travel restrictions? Is there quarantine? Is there amber list? Is there green list? And the third is, you can't travel. And I think that's where, when you're looking at, pent up demand, and you can see it very quickly on Google Analytics in terms of who's searching for what destination. And that was very prevalent in the UK when they would announce you can travel to Spain, and it would surge up. And then the next week it could travel to Amsterdam and so forth. So that's definitely, having the options of where to go drives that kind of sentiment. Yeah, so I think it's a combination of those three patterns.
Okay, that's fair enough. I think, and then Trisha, so we've looked at this sort of billboard effect and using those channels to be front and center in the search criteria. Nicholas's point about, well, can I actually travel, and when can I travel, and where can I travel to, and I'm ready for that as the consumer. From a hotel's point of view, at the very basics, right? How do I stay connected therefore? Am I just using all of those channels and partners, or am I looking at something different? And what is the content of that engagement, right? What's it looking and saying?
Like, I think that, you know, for some time now, hoteliers have been relying on CRM solutions to assist with making sure that they're communicating with past and future guests appropriately. And I think that it will be interesting to see if that changes in any way over the next coming months or years. But the only way that I can really think that it would change is that perhaps there'll be more use of AI and chatbots, etc., to engage more with the customer, but not, you know, to have to use as many staff as you would if you were not using that sort of intelligent solution. But yeah, so I think, you know, there's got to be that continual engagement with people who we want to attract to the hotels. I think also from a method of advertising, I guess, if you think about it, most people when they're booking leisure travel will investigate for a couple of weeks before they actually make bookings. So they'll be, you know, trolling the different OTA sites and looking at different hotels and looking at, you know, which car they want to rent, or, you know, what flight they want to take and that sort of thing. So having really good images and to make sure that your hotel is being represented correctly or well on all of those sites is really important. And that's where solutions like, you know, Ice Portal can assist, because it automatically distributes those images out to each of the OTAs that you want to be shown on and represented on. So I think, as always, it's a matter of making sure that you're present and in the forefront of people's minds, either by direct communication or by ensuring that you're in the places that they're going to search when they're looking for something to do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And Gavin, and I'm thinking about, I follow a lot of Fijian properties in particular, having been there many times, love the country and love the people, right? So and I'm thinking about the messaging that those properties are sending today, and the messaging that those properties have been sending for a while. What are they communicating now over this extended period of time? It doesn't have to be Fiji in particular, right? It can be across the region, but what is that? What is the content of the message over this extended period of time?
Yeah, I think that, you know, like if you listen to any of the Tourism Australia or even TTNQ, and that messaging is all about that dreaming stage, aspiration, you know, definitely space, and you're really highlighting what the hotel is, I guess, it's not so much about selling, it's more about information. And we will take that into a staged approach when certain announcements are made, because even now with certain destinations like Cairns, because it is open, but no one can get there, unfortunately. It's pretty much only Brisbane and the drive markets. So some people don't want to, you know, don't want to be sold to at this time. It's all about what that experience is going to be. You know, we pride ourselves at Shangri-La about our Shangri-La Cares program, what we've done, and even, you know, we've had a vaccination program with the staff in Fiji as well. So I got news today that the country's at about 90% vaccinated on their first vaccination. So, you know, it is giving that the consumer the confidence, but also what they can do. And I think that that's where people are really looking at not just doing a lifetime, you know, I dream about this. They really want to go out and do this, especially with Fiji being a multi-generational destination. You know, it's going to have new, you know, it will probably be the baby boomers and singles traveling for the meantime, while the vaccination program is not going to be probably rolled out to anyone that's under probably 12 or so. So that will be a different environment for a little while. So it's just getting that messaging right about, you know, coming together, but coming together in a safe and in an environment that you can, you know, enjoy life. And I think that's what anyone's probably, you know, having that freedom and that space and culture and learning different and helping each other, I think, is probably one of the big areas that has come to the forefront.
Yeah, and there's a lot to digest there and unpack, right? And health and hygiene, well-being, and that might be from the travel aspects. It might be from the self-care aspect. It might be a corporate culture aspect, as you mentioned, sort of Shangri-La's own initiatives to make sure their own team and staff are cared for. There's a lot there to actually. Whether it's just internal messaging and making it a public message or actually a selling attribute, there's a lot there to potentially take advantage of. I had a question for Duncan, but Tricia, I'm just going to jump in and we talked a lot about health and hygiene there, obviously, and sort of the role of vaccinations, either in a corporate culture or sort of in a community. I know there's some sort of initial thoughts, early stages yet, but this whole concept of vaccine passports, even dare we suggest sort of the different types of vaccines that have been deployed across different regions and nations. What is that going to be a factor in distribution and travel moving forward?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that that people need to feel confident that when they go to a country that there have been vaccinations, and so there's less spread of the disease there. But also, in order to enter a country, I think that there will need to be that proof of, you're not carrying COVID and that you have been vaccinated, and therefore the only way to do that is to have some sort of a vaccine passport. I think it's interesting that in the last probably week or so in Australia, there's even been discussion around, having that vaccine passport to go and eat at a restaurant or whatever. So I think it's just going to be a natural progression from where we've come from. And I think also the interesting thing is that some countries don't recognise some of the vaccinations or types of vaccines that are out there. So, we'll need to be aware of which vaccine we've had and whether the country we want to travel to is actually going to accept that as a recognised vaccine. So I think, the next 6 months, as places start to open up more, this will become more and more important. And yeah, I think it'll just become one of those things that, perhaps years and years and years ago, we don't recall it, but you used to have to prove that you'd had a vaccination for TB and that sort of thing. So, it's not different from what has happened in our past. It's just that it hasn't had to be prevalent in the last probably 30 or 40 years.
Yeah, it used to be a talking point amongst your friends, right? When you did that rite of passage trip from Asia to Europe about which vaccine you get, but now it's a very mundane, it's a very mundane exercise, right?
Yeah.
Duncan, there's been so much so far about sort of these emerging trends and sort of what's the status quo at the moment and what we need to factor in as we're sort of re-emerging, reopening. What's just your very basic sort of suggestions around best practice at the moment, right, to manage rates, availability, inventory, and selling that bundle? What are you just recommending as best practice today?
Yeah, well, we're seeing, I hate using the word agile, but we're seeing hotels being very agile in revising all of that through whichever content management system on a website or a booking engine. So revising that too constantly, which is sad, but hotels are getting very good at it. What our main observation, which is very exciting, is around CRM. So lots of groups investing, I guess bigger hotel groups, investing in getting better and better at CRM. And conversely, some smaller independent hotels investing heavily on social media, getting huge followers. So they don't perhaps see the value of a CRM and the spend needed, but are investing in their own staff or a number of agencies pumping up their social media numbers. And for them, it is the CRM for their audience. And they're doing really, really well. And so there's sort of two contrasting hotel types that are doing well. But I also see, just going back to Tricia's earlier comment, we see a number of chatbot tools doing really well and hotels adopting them quite quickly, and some conversion tools as well. So hotels are looking to talk to hotels online, which is, I guess, where we play differently. And that's contributing to that direct booking growth. And hotels are getting better and better at it. I think there's a lot of data that comes with all of these tools. And so it's just managing to digest as much as you can and just practice and practice and practice. And the last point is really revising any kind of content is free. So on a website, probably most basically, is just revise your content management regularly, and you get better at it, and it doesn't cost a cent to do.
Okay, perfect. We haven't really, and I don't think we'll have time today to really touch on sort of the whole guest journey, the guest experience. And at the moment, this is all sort of pre-stay, right? But your comments just now on sort of the role of social media or a social media presence, and also this sort of chatbot messaging solution, all of that is the entire guest journey stay, right?
Yeah.
And even post-stay towards the next stay. I wish we had thought about that beforehand, because I'd like to do that a little bit more. So we will definitely, I'm going to save a little bit of time maybe just to come back to that for a moment. Duncan and then for Nicholas, perhaps, I think. So Duncan, we've also had some brief thoughts previously, like these broad trends around China. We also had sort of these broad trends pre-COVID around disruptors in our industry. Airbnb, one of them, probably the main one, but certainly not the only one, right? Has COVID helped these type of disruptors, or just merely put them on hold, or have they actually handled this and grown during this period? And maybe Duncan, yourself, and Nicholas, I'll bring you in after.
Yeah, so we connect to Airbnb through our channel manager. So I think they've had a rough time, like all aggregators, but we're seeing a spike in bookings to Airbnb now. And just some public commentary that is in and around Airbnb at the moment is they're very bullish about the remote working and Zoom concept really helping their business model. Their third quarter results are always the best. And right now they're seeing a big spike in stays of 28 days or longer. That's the fastest growing stay category in Airbnb. And so in Australia, it doesn't feel like we're going to be able to go overseas for a while, but companies are used to having their staff working at home. And so you would think that would play to Airbnb in terms of people moving around the country and then working for a period of time, Airbnb in a longer stay. So I think they're probably well positioned to do very well.
Okay, interesting. Nicholas, from a group perspective, a regional perspective, are you sort of thinking the same, seeing the same, or you have some different thoughts there?
I mean, what Duncan mentioned around that kind of extended length of stay is something that we're definitely seeing. That kind of traditional leisure segment, the growth of that. I think when we look at disruptors, what we're always keeping a keen eye on is really that shift in landscape. As everyone kind of goes after the same consumer, we kind of end up in this marketplace economy, right? Where if you look at the kind of traditional play of a meta search to an OTA, we're now seeing the meta search operators become the OTA. So it's becoming an interesting space to navigate, and one that I almost feel is full of disruption, which has also allowed the more regionalized OTAs that Patricia mentioned earlier across APAC to have quite a good stronghold on their local market and own space.
Okay, and Gavin, then talking locally, right? So as a hotelier, how do I position myself to maybe compete against that space? If we're talking about these sort of this new trend, a really long stay type of working from home, how do I position against that?
I think that when you sort of look at it, we're looking from a pure luxury standpoint, and I think that what provides, from a service, fire life and safety, the environmental impact and so forth, that's so much what we're about, and putting, having that confidence that, we offer, our guests a stay, but also we're creating more about experiences, and especially we're seeing, consistency through that luxury segment, and especially with travel agents and luxury travel agents. But guests are really looking for that, being able to enjoy the service, but also other experiences that can be combined, and you know, from that local aspect, and using that to, I guess, give guests the comfort of being able to use a hotel, but having great experiences, but feeling in a secure location as well.
Okay, appreciate that. We're going to run around the room, if you like, for a quick question before we check our Q&A as well for any final other queries from our attendees. Trisha, what does tomorrow look like? Well, I don't know when tomorrow is, so ignore that part of the question, right? But what does tomorrow look like? The markets that we're chasing after, the channels that we're using, or there's some new piece of tech that we're using to pull all that together?
So I think that you know, we talked before about whether the Chinese market would come back, and also about the emerging middle classes. So I know that India at one stage was looking like it would be the next best thing, but I think also we should be looking at places like Indonesia. You know, there's a huge population. It's very close to, or it's right there in Asia Pac, and there's a lot of money being spent in that country. You know, a lot of money, or growth in money happening. So potentially they're one of the next big markets that we should be looking at. I think it's interesting that that for India they have a 6-hour strategy. So they're happy to travel for 6 hours, but perhaps not for longer. And I think in the Asia Pac region, that's probably the case for many of the countries, except maybe Australia and New Zealand. We know that if we want to get to the US or to the UK, we have to travel for a lot longer. But yeah, I think there will be some emerging markets there. I also think it'll be interesting to see what happens with some of the social media booking engines, and whether they become much more important to us. I know in China, the WeChat booking engine is something that's really taking off. Perhaps they're leading the way in that area. So perhaps we should be watching what happens with those sorts of booking engines.
Okay, thank you. Gavin, what does tomorrow look like? I know you've got a vision of maybe tomorrow in some of the Pacific Islands very soon, hopefully, which is exciting, but what does tomorrow look like across the region and for some of your properties in particular?
Look, I think that, as I probably mentioned before, the resilience of what consumers want, that they're very happy to start planning. We've got bookings already for 22 and even into 23. So, and that's international markets. I think that it is a very mixed landscape. I think it's a very mixed distribution, that you need to have the right strategy. It can't just be one over the other. You've got to use a lot of different platforms, and a lot of have your commercial terms all there to be able to navigate a very evolving landscape. That's, there's going to be new players, new marketing, alternate distribution models that are coming through that are all going to try and win the consumer's confidence. I think that long as there is people are definitely keen to travel, and I think that it's definitely it will come back. It's just going to, as soon as everything comes back to an open, I don't know what the norm is going to be. There is no norm. I think that's the new norm. And I think that agility of being able to navigate whatever comes to us and be able to, listen to our customers, but also listen to our guests, because they are moving the path forward to that flexibility. I don't think we've been as flexible as we've ever been before, and I think that is giving people that confidence and just showing that we're in it together, and regardless of where that is, there's going to be new and old players that are going to emerge, but we're there for to to see where this ends up in the next 12 to 18 months.
Okay, thank you. And Nicholas, so, sort of broadly, in your travels and your contacts, are they echoing these sentiments about what tomorrow is and when is?
100%. I think it is a bit of a revolving door. I think, you know, being proactive is one aspect, but I think we have to be very quickly reactive. I think we've seen that with markets opening and closing. Sometimes, you know, you banking on a travel bubble that might be postponed or pushed back and so forth. And I think it's made one be a little bit more, you know, finger on the pulse in terms of when something happens, we need to react quickly. We need to be there for our guests and our customers, to not only support but also to capture the market.
Okay. So Duncan, so far, tomorrow we've got to be, we're resilient, we've got to be flexible, we've got to be proactive and reactive, right? So what does tomorrow look like to handle all of this and take this in consideration?
Well, I guess tomorrow still looks fairly complex for the hotel, dealing with the customer, with all the ebbs and flows of what Nicholas just said, hotels banking on different destinations or travel bubbles. And so really what we're focused on, and our partnership with Shiji is reflective of this, is really that integrated platform, but at the front end, really having that convergence of the CRS and the CRM modules flowing down to good PMS platforms like yours, to make it simpler for the hotel to kind of do what they need to do. Because it is quite complex, all the different things that we've discussed, and we haven't just discussed a few of them. It can be quite daunting for the hotel. So we're just trying to focus our roadmap on making that a easier platform to manage with one vendor at our level, and then obviously good vendors like you at the PMS level and point of sale and so on.
Appreciate that, and you've added complex to the resilience, flexibility, proactive, reactive elements that we need to have in our mind and be skilled to work through in what tomorrow looks like. I know I've got one question here that we had noted down. I'm just checking for the Q&A as well. If there are questions from our attendees, feel free to jot them down. Just before I give everybody an early mark for a few moments, and this is certainly not my area of expertise, but we had some comments on meta search and sort of the investment into meta search, right? Duncan, back to you. How's that factor play and the considerations for meta search? And I think it's like quite relevant to your sort of billboard concept from before, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing hotels, independent hotels, even some holiday parks, and groups do particularly well with meta search. And really there's a few aspects of meta search. And I mean, really it's when a consumer searches a hotel's name on Google, you know, Google plays to the right, and that's really the intent is to come to the hotel website. Google makes it easy for the consumer to see everyone's prices. And so it's quite easy for the hotel to capture that booking direct through Google Hotel Ads. But then what probably everyone's seen is Google moving Google Maps higher and higher into search results. And that's Google Hotel Ads right there. And so it's been just very interesting to watch kind of, I guess, small independent hotels kind of get a grip on that. And really, it's the easiest way to shift bookings to direct. And you can just kind of see the shift almost instantly.
Yeah, wow. Okay. I'm just thinking it's, I don't know, if you look at a generational thing, right? It's not often we get to see all of this play out in front of our eyes. So we're seeing this technology and the results of it playing out in front of our eyes, and we're seeing pandemics and the results of, unfortunately, play out in front of our eyes as well. Nicholas, I think maybe you had a few comments on meta search as well from a group management point of view and a distribution point of view. What is the worth or value of meta search?
Well, I think now more so than ever, you know, to just kind of play on what Duncan spoke about with the billboard effect, it's still extremely important channel. It's the first touch point of any funnel. Although, you know, as I did mention, there is a kind of merge between what a pure meta search company would look like, or platform, but I think they're making some very interesting strategic plays. You know, you can see it with TripAdvisor Plus. You know, again, they're continuously pushing to own the customer. I think now more so than ever, you know, we need to be aware that, you know, there's a lot of movement in not only meta, but all spaces, and we need to be prevalent and visible to our customers.
All right, thank you. Let me just check for any questions. Otherwise, we are coming up close to the hour. Tricia, I've done much better on my timing this week. Much better on my timing.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But I am relieved of host duties now after this episode. So I've come good at the right time. If there's any other questions, we'll just wait a moment while they come through. Just to plug for next week. So episode 3 of Shiji Buzz, our APAC edition, will be all about F&B, the trends in F&B and F&B technology, and importantly, not just point of sale, obviously. So really anything but point of sale if we can. And then episode 4, Avril from our Review Pro team is leading that with regards to all about the guest journey. So we touched on that a little bit today as well. So some of today's elements will certainly carry across. And as I mentioned, I'm relieved of host duties next week. My colleague Ivano will be doing that for us. Everybody, thank you very much. Glad you could join us and be with us on this session. We'll share the recording after this. It'll take a couple of days to get that to you, but we'll certainly share that through. If you like what you saw, hope to see you next week. Please reach out on LinkedIn, etc. If you'd like to chat further, we'd appreciate that. Tricia and gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye. Thank you.